Algarve. Tourist information. You can get a map and got more details about Faro.
In charge of it, and that's pretty much so together with some friends of mine, some years ago, we decided to create this small company, Faro Free Walking Tours. Yeah, so in order to give this insight to the people that visit us, so that besides just walking around, you also understand a little bit of history, the culture, and what are the influences that made the city to look as it is nowadays. So please feel free to ask me any question that comes to your mind during the tour. And if I know the answer, I will gladly tell it. If I don't, I will not pretend that I do. Has anyone been in Faro before? Before we start? No, first time.
First time.
Okay, cool. So I guess they say whatever. You just believe me because you don't have any other reference. So I can actually start with very practical information for you that are still here during today. Because you see these stands over here, maybe some of you already had the chance. I don't know if you were here yesterday or not. Why are these stands here? So these stands are part of a fair that is taking place since Wednesday, and it ends. So there is it's still on today and tomorrow, and it's the fair of wine, cheese, and like sausages, chorizo, prosciutto, all this kind of product. So it's there today and tomorrow still from 12 until 11 in the night. So at any time you can just pass and try its cheeses and wines from all the country, not only from the south. They come from all the country, and there are some parts where you can also eat, drink, and have some fun. Yeah? So this is something practical so that you can have a plan. Okay? And now actually let's start from the very beginning, from when Faro was actually born. Faro was born around 2,800 years ago, century 8 before Christ. At that time, of course, as you can imagine, settlement was way smaller than it is today. And the first people that actually arrived here and decided to create a settlement here were the Phoenicians. Maybe some of you have heard about this name before, the Phoenicians. Phoenicians were mainly sailors inside the Mediterranean Sea. And here, we are not in the Mediterranean Sea anymore, but actually, we are very, very close to the entrance or the exit of it, depending on the perspective, which is officially the Gibraltar Strait. Yeah? So in Spain, we have this pointy part that almost touches Morocco. So from there, inside, let's say, it's where the Mediterranean Sea takes place. Here, we have already the Atlantic Ocean, but also in Faro and in other parts here, between the Atlantic Ocean and the cities, there is something called Ria Formosa, which is nowadays a natural park. So it's actually a salt marsh, and it's a lagoon system fed by the sea. So the water doesn't go from here to the sea, but the other way around. It's the water from the ocean that actually enters and makes the water here. That's why it's calm, but it's still salty water. Yeah? It's not sweet water. So Phoenicians came here. This is one of the reasons why they decided to settle, because of the water, because of the facility also to stop boats here, because this is a very calm part. So before you continue sailing in the Atlantic Ocean, if you are coming from the Mediterranean, this is a very good last stop before you actually go in the wide open ocean. So also this made them create the original name to the city, which back then was Osonoma. This is the original name of this settlement, Osonoma. What is Osonoma? Osonoma is a combination from two Phoenician words, Oson and Eba. And translated literally to English, it means warehouse, salt marsh. Because this was basically what we were. We were not a big city, we were a small settlement, like a commercial port, with some resources that some people would come and exchange, and we are inside a salt marsh. So they kept it very, very simple in the first name. After 600 years, there was time for a second civilization to pass here. Just for you to know, there are 4 of them. That you know more or less in which stage you are, and you know more or less when I would shut up for the first time. It's important to know. So yeah, so we are in the second one. This time, the Roman Empire were the second ones to come here. They arrived around century 3, still before Christ, and they conquered the city And they were actually responsible to make the city inside the old town to look a bit as it is nowadays. So the old town officially starts from that arch over there, where the touristic train is now. Okay. From that arch on, that is where we are going after, it's where the old town is. So this is where the original city was created. And actually the structure that we have nowadays is not very different from the structure that was created by the Romans. This meaning that where we have the streets at the moment is more or less where the streets are. And where we have the buildings is where the buildings are. Of course, different buildings, different streets. And also a very big difference that we have at the moment is the level of where we are. Because now we are more or less 3 meters above the Roman civilization. So what has happened here is that people have been building what already existed. So actually, big part of the history of Faro is buried under the actual city that we have today. And we keep finding a lot of evidences every time we need to dig the city for some reason. Especially inside the old towns, and also here where we are, on this line over here, around the square, and then in front of where we have now the bus stations, train station, maybe some of you like that. And why there in the room? But I'm not mentioning the square. That actually nowadays is the main square here in Faro. This is because in the past this square used to be very different. Because actually this square is built upon water. I will go around with the pictures, okay? So this was where we are. And this is line. So this is where we are. And this line of everything you see there used to be water in the past. The exception was the low town now and the line that we have here, this one. Yes, and also here. So this is where we are. And this line over here is this line. So everything you see there is built upon water. Yeah, so totally different the square than it is today. Civilization. This time, Visigoths. Visigoths are coming from what now in Europe is more or less the area where we have the Balkans. Yeah, so where we have Bosnia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Croatia, yeah, so that area, that's it. So they arrived here century 2 already after Christ. They didn't really change the city a lot, I mean the structure of the city, but they added something to the name of it that became very important and remained connected with the city for many, many centuries. The name of Holy Mary. So from this time, the city starts being called Holy Mary of Sonova. And this is how it remained for many, many centuries. During more or less 500 years, there were constant fights between Romans and Visigoths. So actually the city changed hands several times. So for 70 years it was Visigothic, then it became Roman again, Visigoth, Roman, Visigoth, and this is what happened until century 8, until 711, to be more precise, when the fourth civilization arrived to this place. This time, the Moorish community coming from the north of Africa. So where we have now, along the Mediterranean, where we have now Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, yeah, so all the north part of the African continent, together with the south part of Europe. So we have Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, yeah, so all this around used to be in that time a kingdom called Kingdom Al-Andalus. That's why still nowadays, the south of Spain has the name of Andalusia, because of the Kingdom Al-Andalus. And that's also the reason why here in the south of Portugal, we also have a specific name for this region, which is Algarve. Algarve comes from the original word for this region that used to be in the past Algarve, and the full name was Al-Harb al-Andalus. Al-Harb in Arabic means the West. So we were actually called in the past the West part of the kingdom Al-Andalus. That's how we stayed until today. Al-Harb, Al-Garb, Al-Garb, as we pronounce it nowadays. So these were the four civilizations that passed here before the arrival of Catholic kings in the 13th century that officially still prevail until today. And all of them, they left an influence in what we do, in the way we eat, in the food in the traditions, customs that we have, in the language that we speak. So all these influences can be seen, but definitely the one that is still more present is the one from the Moors, so from the last civilization to pass here before the Catholic. You can see that in many things, but definitely the language is one where you can actually see it very easily. That's the reason why here in the south we have cities like Albufeira, Algesur, Alcotim, Almodóvar, Aljustrel, and many others, or in the south of Spain you have Almeria, Alicante, and many others. Every word in Portuguese that starts with al comes from Arabic language, from al something. We have actually around 1,000 words in Portuguese that start with al. So all of them, they come from Arabic influence. This is something that is easily seenable here in the south. Yeah. Okay, very good. So before we go inside, I want to tell you last thing here before we enter the arch that is connected with the statue that is on top of the arch over there. That's a statue. Saint. Anyone knows which saint? I need to connect with. Yeah, Saint Thomas of Aquinas.
Saint Thomas.
Statue of Saint Thomas of Aquinas. And I just wanted to look at it and see that actually statue. But it's actually the statue is in this position. I just want you to keep this image in your mind because actually in another part of the city I will come back to this statue and I will actually tell you something about it. But for now, just keep the picture that the way that the saint is with the knees bent. And let's start going inside. Yes. Let's start with this. Okay, it's up here, so that's who wants to be on the sun, that's the sun, and who wants to be on the stage, and we are on the stage. Going up. So, before we enter more in the old town, there is something I want to tell you about the arch itself. Yeah, so I've been telling you that the city is quite old, around 2,800 years, but actually the arch that is the main entrance to the old town is quite young compared to the rest, because it's only from 1821. It's only from the 19th century. So how come, if the city is way older, and this is the main entrance to the old town, why is it so young compared to the rest of the city? And now you can just say whatever pops to your mind. What do you think that happened? It was rebuilt, true, but there is a specific reason why there was the need to rebuild. It was destroyed. But that's the main. So in the 18th century, here in Portugal, there was a huge earthquake. It was in 1755, 1st of November 1755. And you might actually, especially if you go to Lisbon, a lot of times in history books it says the earthquake of Lisbon. Because it's true that Lisbon got totally destroyed during the earthquake. Actually, the epicenter of the earthquake was not inside, it was not so close to Lisbon, but was way closer to where we are, because it was in the south coast, inside the Atlantic Ocean, in front of a city called Lagos. Maybe some of you have heard about it. It's around 80 kilometers from where we are to the west. So the epicenter of the earthquake was there. It was really a devastating earthquake. What scientists, like the ones that we have now, say, according to the Britons that there are and the destruction that existed, that it was around the 9 in Richter scale, for you to understand how massive it was and how destroying it was. So actually, in Faro and in all the other coastal cities here in Algarve and in a big part of the country, at least until Lisbon, and a little bit further than Lisbon, the historical buildings, although they have been rebuilt as the original ones, they are not 100% the original ones. Here, although there is an exception, that is the door that is over there. So not the main door, but actually that side door. Yeah? Remember that all around here was water in the past. So actually that side door was also approached by small boats. This was another way of entering the city. That door is here since the Moorish period. It's here since century 9. And actually it's the only one in all the Algarve that managed to survive the earthquake, and it's still in the original position where it was. So that's why it has this horseshoe shape, which is very characteristic. And that here in Portugal you don't find it so much anymore because of the earthquake. When you go to the south of Spain, you still find a lot more of this influence. In Cordoba, in Granada, in Sevilla, it's easier to identify. Yeah? That's why also the reason why the door, it's almost 2 meters lower than what we are. Yeah? Because that was the level of the city some centuries ago. Yeah, around 1,000 years ago. Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, very good. So saying that, let's start going back to the center of the old town.
So, Carlos, the word Algarve is come from the word Arabic west.
Al-Harb.
Al-
Al-Harb.
Are you Arabic or Arabic?
No.
Uh-huh. Al-Harb is a word because I can't Arabic.
Al-Harb with pronunciation, but how do you say the
Al-Gharb.
west?
Al-Gharb.
Al-Harb. Yes. I don't know how to pronounce it sometimes.
Al-Gharb.
Al-Harb. Yes.
It means west.
The west, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Al-Harb is...
Al-Harb is word and Al-Harb.
yeah.
Yes. For me, it's more difficult to pronounce.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. So Al-Gharb is mean west. Okay.
Yeah, the west. Nice. The west side of the place.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, amazing.
Okay, so here we are into the center of the old town. The east center, since the very beginning, this has always been the center of the old town. For every civilization that passed here, this was always the center. So for you to have an idea of what is around us, the building over there is the city hall. That's the first thing over there. Then this one over here is very characteristic. Is the Bishop's Palace. Still nowadays a bishop residence of the Bishop of there. But a small part of it is also used as a museum because it has quite an interesting collection of tiles. So that's why the doors are open and people can visit it. That is connected with the Bishop's Palace, which is the seminary. So the place where young men live and study in order to become priests. Seminary. So nowadays we don't really have any students at the moment here in the seminary because it's not so popular anymore. So in the last 4 years we didn't have anyone applying to actually become a priest here in Algarve. And this is the only seminary we have in all Algarve. So it's not the most popular thing at the moment. So because of that, actually those words over there are actually used by an order of nuns. Yeah, because the building is it's not abandoned because someone takes care of it, but it's not being used as the building that for many people is considered the main one here in Faro is the one behind me, the cathedral. Cathedral that was built here back in the 13th century. It was actually built, it's a Catholic school here, and the cathedral was built using parts and on top of the building that previously existed here, which was a mosque at that time. And the mosque had already been built on top of the Roman temple that existed here before the Moorish period. So for every civilization, they just kept building on top of each other, yeah, on top of all the ones that were before them. And why? Why did all of them choose the same spot to put the religious building? The one that was connected with spirituality and religion always here in the center. Because this is the highest point inside the altar. Yeah, so we came a little bit up. So this is always the place where you would put the religious building, so that they would be closer to heaven. Yeah? So the more close you are to heaven, the best for that. Dependently of which religion you're professing, this was always the most important point here in the center. So all these buildings have been severely destroyed during the earthquake, and all of them were rebuilt under the ideas of one person. This man that is represented here in the statue is called Francisco Gomes de Faro. He used to be the bishop of Algarve after the earthquake. During the earthquake, like when the earthquake happened, he was not living in Portugal. He was living in Italy, and he came back. And together with him, he brought an Italian architect called Francesco Fabri. That's why if you go in the buildings and you see these blue boards, you'll see a lot of times this name as the author of the buildings. Francesco Fabri, name appears at Francisco and Francesco were the two ones that came here and managed to put the city back on its feet. I will show you, because it's the main one here, the cathedral. The cathedral is used as a regular church, especially during the weekend. But during the week, mainly, it's used as a touristic point. So it has an entrance fee, but also it allows you to give other things that during the weekend, I mean, on Saturday morning, sometimes they still give it. But on Sunday morning, for example, there is a regular mass here, so they don't allow the access of all of it, including the top. Yeah, because during the week you can actually go up until where are the bells over there. That's a viewpoint. There's an entrance fee which is €5. So, just to have an idea of how the cathedral looks inside. So this is how it looks inside. What they used the most, the materials were stone and tiles. Yeah, so this was the most common materials, especially after the earthquake. Use it not for every mass, but especially in these occasions like now, Easter, Christmas, so the most important dates in the Catholic calendar. Usually they use this organ. For the regular masses, they usually use a smaller one that they also have something. So, two more things I would like to cover. One is connected here with the roofs, yeah, that you see on top of the bishop's palace. But actually, if you look around, you look at the houses there, you see that they have the same kind of roof. You see that they have the same kind of roof. So this kind of roof is called Caesar. And the inspiration to build these roofs actually came from very far from where we are, from Southeast Asia. Back in the 15th century, when, during a period of Portuguese history, Portuguese sailors decided to try to travel around the world. They managed to arrive to Brazil, to India, and to other parts. Especially when they arrived in Southeast Asia, yeah, in the areas of India, where is now also Malaysia, Thailand.
Macau.
So Macau,
I was been
that's a
there.
big part
Yeah.
that until 2002 was a Portuguese colony.
Yes.
So in that part, they actually found a lot of houses similar with roofs similar to this. This meaning that the roofs were always very steep and it were four sides. Why? Because we are talking about a place or places where usually rain is very severe. Yeah, when it comes like big quantities at the same time. So having a flat roof in your house is the worst that you can have because all the water will be retained there. So what you need to have is a house that allows the rain to just go down. So they found it interesting, the shape of it, the technique that was used for it, and they decided to bring it here. Of course, here we don't use it so much because of rain, although now there is a few. But actually, these roofs became handy in something else because these roofs they don't have a ceiling. So when you are inside the house, you actually see the roof structure, which is done in wood. And what happens is that because hot air is lighter than cold air, it goes up. So what happens in this house is that the hot air stays concentrated where the roofs are, so actually makes the houses way cooler in the part where people actually live, the downer parts of the house. So it actually makes a big difference, especially in summer when you get these kind of places, like the difference temperature it's really, really big. Sometimes 7, 8, or even more degrees, which is really, really nice in summer, which is really, really terrible in winter because it happens exactly the same. It's way colder inside the school than in the street. When you go inside, it's not very, very hot. This is very common here in Portugal. The houses inside are very cool. So, this experience, I see what it is. Because a lot of times people come to say, they think, okay, here it's sun, inside the houses, it's not. A lot of times you need to have more clothes inside than actually on the street. Then, next thing I want to tell you is again related with Francisco. And also with the seminary. When you look at the seminary and tell me if you see something that is a little bit uncommon when you look at it. Windows. There is another thing. The port is mainly there because the sea is just behind, so it was a way that you could see who is approaching. There is another thing in the building that is a bit uncommon. It's connected with windows. It's with the windows in general. If you look at your right side, you see that the windows
There's
the right side are very different from the windows on the left.
Yes.
Ones on the right, they have a little way more details, so very. And then there is a column of stones that actually separates the two types of window. Why?
This is a new one.
Yeah, this is the newer part that was mainly done after the earthquake. What Fabri decided to do is to keep the original windows as they were, which they were originally built during Baroque period. That's why they have all these details. Then he decided to put a column of stone to somehow mark this difference. And then when he rebuilt the building, it was already during the neoclassic period. So that's why these windows here are very similar to the original classic. Yeah, so just round shape, way more simple, let's say, than the ones from the Baroque period. So also Francisco that is here is actually connected with the statue that I showed you before. Yeah, when we entered the ark. Remember about it? Okay. So first of all, why is there a statue of Saint Thomas of Aquinas in the entrance of the city of Faro nowadays? This is because in the past, during the period of Francisco, there was a disease that was spreading very, very close to Faro. So many towns around infected by it. And people here started praying to St. Thomas of Aquinas to protect. The truth is that disease never really affected the population in Faro as many other places around. Let me say that you play the same something in order to and thank the fact that he protected. So this statue was brought from Italy. It was not built here. It was brought from Italy. And to put it there where it is, the niche, they decided to make it in a very official way. So they put information on the square in order that they could see they lifting the statue and putting it there. But when they started lifting the statue and trying to set the niche, they understood something that the statue was too tall for the statue. So how did they manage to put the statue inside? Well, it was thanks to Francisco Gomes de Flaro and these miraculous actions. So what the legend says is that at that time, Francisco Gomes de Flaro went to the statue and whispered on the ears of the statue if he could heal the bit so that he could fit inside the bit. And that's what happened. So the statue just that's why the statue is officially inside the niche. Yes. Oh, very good. Last thing, tell you before we go from here. It's going to be the oranges that we have around. Yeah, you see this orange trees around? Usually, the question is, can I eat them? Yes, you can eat them. It's not forbidden to eat them. They are not poisonous. They will not have to work. The second question then is, are they tasty? And of course, the reason is no. That's why there are so many oranges and no one really picks them. Because this is an orange tree, but it's a very specific, it's called citronella. Which is mainly to make candles, to make shower gel, perfumes, and everything that because they have a very good aroma. They really smell very orange, but the taste is super, super bitter. They have like a breeding species between a lemon tree and an orange tree. Yeah? But still, just for you to know, if someone is curious at some point of your stay here, it's not forbidden. You can take, you can try, and then maybe it will happen something like that. Yeah? Someone didn't like it and just decided to throw it on the floor. So please, if you don't like it, just put it in the bin. Don't throw it on the floor. Yeah? Okay, very good. So shall we go from here?
Yes.
We go to the back of it. Okay, so we stop here in this square because of mainly two things. The first one is the king that is represented here, and then also very important one is the building that's behind that now it's under renovation, but was very important to mark here in the city of Faro. So let's start from the king. So first, also the third. Also the third was the king responsible to conquer the city back in the 7th century. For you to understand the importance of this conquering, we have to go back 100 years before, to the middle of the 12th century, when Portugal, as an independent nation, actually. So everything started in the period in which they were of Leon and Castilla, that they were the origin of Spain as a country, and on the eastern part, on the western part of the kingdoms of Leon and Castilla, there was a small county, Portuguese Condado Portugalês. This county, although it had its own administrator, it still led to very good rules of connected. At some point, the administrator of this land was a woman called Teresa. Teresa had a son named Afonso Henrique. And Afonso Henrique, since very young age, didn't feel that he was connected with the kingdoms of Leon and Castilla, but he always felt that this connection was mainly with the people that passed mainly in the north of what's now the north of Portugal and north of Spain, which were the Celtics, and also the Vikings at some point, but mainly the Celtics. This is the main influence. So because of that, he didn't really want to obey the rules of someone that he didn't feel connected. His mother disagreed. So what happened? They had a fight between one against each other. And when I mean a fight, not people in a house shouting, but actually preparing two armies. The one of Teresa the Mother and the army of Afonso Henriques. They went to the battlefield in a hill called Somamed, and still today is famous this battle as Battle of Somamed. The winner of this battle was Afonso Henriques. Teresa had to leave his land at that time, and this is how Portugal was born. On that day, Afonso Henriques proclaims this piece of land as independent kingdom, and now he is the king of it. So this is how Portugal started as a country, in a place that now has a city called Guimarães. It's very close to Porto. A lot of times when people visit Porto, they pass also by Guimarães. There's big original castle still there, and the big sentence saying, "Here Portugal was born." The sentence of Guimarães, so that we always remember that in case we forget it. So yeah, so this is how Portugal was born. And then what Afonso Henriques did, and all the next generations of kings did, was to try to come south, conquering land. So actually arriving here in Faro, in cities in the south, and conquering them meant that the country was finished. So this was the end of the country. And more or less, we have the same borders since 1254 here in Portugal. So Portugal is considered to be the country in the world that for longer time is the same country. Yeah? For almost 100 years, we are the same rectangle in the western part of the European continent. This conquering here was achieved not by a battle. Yeah? Many of the conquering was done by a battle, but the one here in South Portugal was actually achieved through an agreement. An agreement that was signed both by the King Afonso III and the Polish governor of that period that allowed both communities to live here. So actually, for many centuries, both communities lived here in peace. This also allowed a third community to actually come and live in Faro at some point. This time, the Jewish community. In the end of the 15th century, when Inquisition was spreading in many European countries, Portugal was still a safe place for the Jewish community. So a lot of families came here. So in Faro, there was a period during which three communities were living in peace. The Portuguese, yeah, and there was a quarter called Portuguese Quarter. Then there was a quarter called Moorish Quarter, which is in Portuguese is Moraria, and the quarter for the Jewish families called Judiaria. The three communities living here in peace, no major issues. This even allowed big happenings to take place, such as, for example, this building that I told you. In the beginning, this building was belonging to the Jewish community. And it was inside this building, for the first time ever in all Portugal, someone printed a book using the modern press of Gutenberg. It was here in 1487. This is when the first book in all Portugal was printed. Inside here, by a member of the Jewish community called Samuel Gato. What he printed was a book called Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament of the Bible. Perfect. Together in peace, Faro becoming quite prosperous. Sometimes with some people that decide to change everything. And here, in the end of the 15th century, we also had a king that decided to change a lot of things. So first of all, for him, Portugal was too small, because he always felt that he was way more magnanimous than Portugal. Portugal was a too small country for his magnitude. So what they tried to do is, first of all, to try to expand the country by the sea. So during the period of his king, the period of King Manuel, that Portuguese sailors arrived to Brazil, India, and other parts of the world. And so he was already achieving this expansion by the sea, but he also wanted to gain more influence by land. But by land, we have a very specific condition in Portugal, which is we only have one neighbor. We only make borders with one country, and the neighbor is around 4 times bigger than we. So attacking the neighbor could never be a good option. And he knew it, and he never tried to attack it. Instead, what he tried to use was like the opposite of war, which is love. In this case, marriage, to be more precise. What he tries to do, he tries to marry the right person. was she, in this case, the Spanish princess. It was still not Spain as the country as today. It was still different kingdoms, but just to make the short the story a little bit. So her name was Isabel. A lot of people never heard about. She was the daughter of Isabel and Fernando the Catholic. This one usually are more famous. The parents of Isabel are more famous. So he tries to marry, and this marriage is granted, so it takes place, but it's granted under one condition. The condition is that there not exist people that were not Catholics. And Manuel says, okay, if that's what it takes to make myself bigger, let's do it. In 1496, just 9 years after the printing of the book here, there is an official document signed by Manuel. In Portuguese, it's called Faro. This means an official document of the king. That is signed saying that everyone that is not Catholic is not welcome anymore. Either people convert or they need to abandon. As you can imagine, what happened is that both communities, Jewish one and Jewish one, basically they just left. Jewish one mainly coming again north of Africa, and the Jewish one mainly settling around the edges of Amsterdam. That's what nowadays quite a big Jewish community. So the building over here that was belonging to the Jewish community, and it starts belonging to the Catholic Church. Inside what they built is a cloister, so nuns started living here for many centuries. Then this building in the last 500 years has been many different things. There's been a factory at some point, there's been a library at some point. Nowadays it's a museum. As you see, it's under renovation, so it's not possible to visit it. But I will just show you two things that are some of the most important findings that they have inside. Because this is the museum where they bring everything that is found under the sea, being it from the Roman period, the Moorish period, the Visigoth period. So everything that we find, we bring it here. Yes. So the main piece that we have inside, this one, it's a mosaic, Roman mosaic, it's around 2,000 years old. It was found just in front of the train station, under the road that is now for the car, some years ago. I will go around with the picture. It's a representation of a god called Oceania. It's around 12 meters long, for you to have an idea, yeah, of how long it is. Yeah, it's considered the national treasure, which is the highest rank in a piece that you find in terms of archaeology. Yes, and it's a representation. Well, among other things, it's a representation of a god that is here on the middle, called God Oceanus. Has anyone ever heard about God Oceanus?
No.
No, not very famous. But probably almost all of you, or most part of you, have heard about Poseidon as the god of the oceans, which is, well, it's true, but not totally, because the original Titan god of the oceans is actually Oceanus, which is of Poseidon. So Poseidon is just the nephew of this one. Yes, it's the son of the brother of Oceanus. That's why ocean is called ocean, and not Posei something, because of Oceanus and not because of Poseidon. Then another thing that you can find inside, among other pieces, some of the coins that were used here during the time that the city was still called Osonoba. And this is how they used to write it. Now we write it in a different way. We actually have a lot of businesses that use this name. We have Osonoba Tours, Osonoba Cafe, Osonoba things. So this is how they used to write it. During the Roman period. No, with a big connection with the sea. There's a species of gold. Always there was a connection with the sea. Sea here has always been very important for us. Sea and salt. So, as I told in the beginning, we are inside the salt marsh. And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of civilizations decided to settle here. Well, for Phoenicians it was already important, but definitely for the Romans. Salt was the most important resource that you could get. Yeah, we are talking about a period that salt was used as a mean of conservation of food. Yeah, so they were, for example, producing something called garum, was kind of like a fish pate. Fish with a lot of salt is something that they use a lot. And also salt was so important in the past for Romans. Some of you might also know this already. That salt was actually a way of paying people. Okay? So salt was used as the way to pay people actually when they perform some task. And it's from there and from the original word in Latin for salt, which is sale, that was then created the word salarium, that still we use nowadays as the word to express something that you get when you work. Salary in English, salario in Portuguese and in Spanish, salario also in Italian, in French, how is it? Salaire. So all of them, they come from the word sale because of the importance of salt in the past. So salt, still for us nowadays, it's very important resource. So important. In Faro, you don't see a lot of salt hills and things like that, but we have a salt mine that is not very far from here. Actually, so important that in the south, here in Algarve, we produce 94% of the salt of the country. So here is still a big place where you can find salt with the trademark brand. Okay, very good. All good so far? Everything that way? Then you should survive already after. The water is exactly there. You have to go clean anywhere. Okay, so I stopped here because of this piece over here, and well, why is it important? This piece is a representation of what I just told you. This is the time when Alfonso III and the Moorish community that was here make this agreement that allowed both communities to live here. So, especially in that time, the Portuguese quarter was inside this wall that we have here, and the Moorish community was living here, that in the past used to be actually the fertile land of Faro. So here were the farms before. Now, as you see, the only thing that grows here is cars. Yeah, so no more farms at the moment. And why I also bring you here? So first of all, to talk about tiles. Yeah? Tiles, it's actually something that nowadays is very connected with Portugal, and a lot of times when people think about Portugal as a country, it's one of the first thoughts that come is the tiles. But actually, tiles originally are not from here. Yeah? Who were the ones that actually introduced tiles here in Portugal? The Moorish community. Not this type of tiles. Yeah? So mainly, they were tiles more geometric and with more colors. These ones, the blue and white ones, they came some centuries after by the influence of the Netherlands of the Delft school. You have heard also about it. That usually uses this technique of blue and white. So mainly the influence is from the Delft school of the Netherlands. Then, there are two more things here that are very important for us. There are two fruits. So the first one is this one over here. The ones that we also have inside, yes, so oranges. And why are also they important? So nowadays, we are a very big producer of oranges, and oranges, especially of Algarve, are famous in the country for being the most juicy ones and the most tasty ones. But actually, originally, they are also not from here. Who brought oranges here? The same persons that brought tiles and many other things. But actually, the oranges that were brought mainly from the north of Africa are not exactly the ones that we have today. Why? Because after some centuries, Portuguese sailors actually brought oranges and sweet species of oranges from another part of the world. So actually, and they was the main influence that we still have in Europe. So does anyone know from where actually comes the sweet species of oranges that we mainly have now in Europe? From China.
China.
China. Yes.
Orange.
This one, even if you go in Wikipedia, is there. Right.
Never guessed that.
Exactly. So China. Yes. So the sweet species of orange coming from the area mostly close to Macau. That used to be a Portuguese colony in the past.
Yes.
Yeah, with the mandarins and all this part. That's why in many languages, such as Dutch, German and others, Latvian, Estonian, and many other languages, the word for orange is appelzina or sinaasappel, which means just apple from China. That's exactly what it means. Apple from China. Yeah? The Chinese apple. Or in languages such as Turkish, Romanian, Greek, and many others, how do you say orange in Greek?
Portugali.
Portugali. Why? Because it was the Portuguese sailors bringing that. So in Romanian, in Turkish, is Portugali, Portugali, Portucale, something.
Portugal in Arabic.
In Arabic is also
Portugal.
Portugal.
Ah.
So in many other languages, also you can see this influence. Then, there is here another fruit that is very important for us. This one is a little bit more complicated to understand what it is. Because of that, I actually brought some with me, because
Picture. Okay.
it's easier.
No, this is
Not picture, the real
Okay.
the real fruit. Yeah? So you can just pass it around. I'll leave one here and just pass it around. And one from here, and you can pass it around if you have never seen it.
This is a fruit?
I've seen this before.
Yeah, when they are green, they are like this. This one is now, it's very recent. They are still green. In November is when they get brownish. These ones are at least already some months. Yeah, this kind
It's
of.
bean. It's the same in Sweden, something like that. Smaller.
This is called, in English, carob.
Carob. Okay.
In many languages, such as French, caruba, something like that. In German, it's totally different. It's Johannes Brot, totally different name. And yeah, so carob in Portuguese is called alfaroba. Okay, it's again Arabic influenced words. Why? Because they are also not originally from China.
Thanks, Carlos.
They were also introduced by the Moorish community coming from the north of Africa. It also in Spanish is algarroba. That's the name of it. Again with the al prefix. Yeah? And why carobs are important nowadays? Well, first of all, carobs, they usually grow very well in places where there is no much rain. So that's why they are a very easily adaptable tree here. And you can find them, for example, in Europe, just in the south part of the countries. So you find them in the south of Portugal, south of Spain, south of Italy, south of Greece. For example, in Creta, it's full, but not in the north of these countries. Yeah, so it really needs to go more to the south, and then in the north of Africa. Yeah, again in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, so all this stretch. Yeah? Carobs, at some point, they were so important for the economy here because they have some seeds inside, and these seeds have more or less, usually, always the same weight. Yeah? Now, of course, we have way more precise scales, but in the past, they were super similar. So actually, they were used as a way to weight other cereals. So this is what we use to weight wheat, corn, and many other things that we had here at some point. Yeah? So there is actually a specific measure in this called arroba, that comes from alfaroba, which means more or less 25 kilos. Nowadays it really means 25 kilos, but in the past, of course, the measure was a bit different. So they were so important because of that. But then in the 70s, 80s, 90s, carobs really lost their importance. No one was picking them anymore, so they were just falling from the trees. But especially in the last 10 years, they became again super trendy because now they were more studied and they understood that actually nutritionally they are very healthy. So they are very often used as a replacement for chocolate because the texture and the color is very similar, although the taste is different. But they are also super sweet. So it means that when you do something with carob, and usually we use it a lot to make cakes or pies or this kind of things, also bread, beer and other things, but mainly cakes. So you never use sugar. So you just use the natural sugar of the fruit. So they don't taste like chocolate, okay? It's different taste, But in restaurants, in bakeries here, you'll always find a lot of times a sweet made of alfaroba, or a sweet made of figs, or a sweet made of almond. And these are the three main products that we have here in Algarve that are considered more endemic, yeah, like from here. All of them, they are dry trees, so they don't need almost water to grow. That's why they can survive here very easily. So you can find sweets made of these three, sometimes even at the same time. Yeah, a sweet with the three of them or a combination of two of them. And yes, carrots, just last information. So 10 years ago, one arroba of carrots would cost around 3 euros. It was like 3 euros for 25 kilos. Yeah, so that's why people were not catching it. Yeah, it was not worth the work. Yeah, the effort. But last year, for example, when they were selling carrots, they managed to sell carrots for the same amount, 25 kilos, for 47 euros. So this is how much it grew in more or less 8 years, from 3 to 47 euros. Yeah? So just for you to understand how trendy it is actually nowadays. So we have a lot of companies now, and a lot of people planting carrot trees again. So this is how the world makes this evolution. Yeah? So things that in the past were not famous, now they are, and the other way around. Okay, very good. Shall we continue from here? We go now in that direction. We are now out of the old town, so we go to the downtown part. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your holidays. Just to consider, the embassy is in Lisbon. Yeah, populations are smaller country, and we have the biggest population, the biggest migrant population that in Portugal. We have a lot of Muslims right now. Here, officially, probably. Shops around in the city center. And actually, this part connected with the community that I told you before, the Jewish community. I told you before that in the end of the 15th century, there was this King Manuel that actually kicked out the Jewish community from Portugal in general. But the Jewish community actually came back to Portugal after some sin. After the earthquake, one of the ideas of the person that was in charge of the economical growth of the country, his name, original name is Sebastião, but he got famous with the name Marquês de Pombal. If you have been in Lisbon, or if you pass by Lisbon, you'll hear this name a lot. He was responsible for the economical growth of the country after the earthquake, and one of his ideas was to manage to convince the Jewish community to come back to Portugal because of their usually famous skills as economists, as traders, as merchants, and he managed to do that. Of course, to achieve that, he had to grant benefits to the community. Yeah, so that's how they did it. But they did. For example, here in Faro, 60 families, they came, they settled here, and they were the ones that took these streets. They were the ones that transformed these into the commercial area as we have today. Yeah, with the shops in the downward floor, and then the houses on top of it. Now we don't have the Jewish community here in Faro, not for some problem, just the University of Faro is very recent. So the young generations, when they wanted to study, they had to go abroad. And slowly, the community just disappeared by itself. But the main reason why we're into this street is not because of the shops, but actually because of the floor. This is the main reason why we are here. And I see that it's starting to rain. So, the floor over here, I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to go to some of the countries that in the past were belonging to the were part of the Portuguese colonies. Like if you go to Angola, if you go to Brazil, if you go to India, you'll see the streets are exactly like this over here. And probably you have already noticed, especially if you have been in other parts of Portugal, that actually all the streets in Portugal like this. Maybe we can bring it here so that at least we still have a slight protection. So yeah, so this is basically the only way that we know how to do streets. Yeah? So if you go to any village in Portugal, any city, all the streets are always like that. This in Portuguese is called calçada portuguesa. It doesn't have a very good translation in English, but something like Portuguese pavement. Try to translate it very, very roughly. And well, in general, people find it interesting, but this one here in Faro has extra spice, let's say. Yeah? So it has something extra comparing to the rest of the country, which is in this part of the symbols, yeah, that you see around, you'll see different symbols in the if you look there, you see crosses. In some of them, you see something different.
Fish.
Some of them will be very abstract. Some of them will have something that it's understandable. Yeah. So my invitation for you now, yeah. So all is here on this part of the drawings. Yeah. So my invitation for you now is just to walk the street towards the end. I will meet you in the end of the street, and then I will actually tell you why are these symbols here and what is the meaning behind it, yeah? Because there is actually a reason for the symbols to be. Before you start walking by yourself, I will kindly ask you to come with me to the This one is very, very different from this. Can you understand something like that? I mean, it's not so easy. I mean, people see also different. Kind of a book, yeah. It's not exactly a book, but it's. Yeah. That's part of the symbol, yeah. So this is what you are saying. Yeah? So if you take out that part and take into consideration just this. And this is not a hole, but it's actually a sickle. And the hammer and the sickle, it's actually a political. The cross between a hammer and a sickle is it's a political symbol, yeah? The symbol of communism. Yeah? Hammer and the sickle. Okay, so enjoy the street. See with the weather. And I'm meeting in the end, and then I'm going to explain why the symbols are here. And in this one.
Star,
Yeah, we have this symbol here.
flower.
Here you go, stop. Stop safety. Hello. Okay, so it's something sort of different from the rest. See? And yeah, the question is, so why are the symbols here and what is actually the meaning behind it? And actually the answer is there is still an ongoing discussion inside the historians community between a part of them that believes it supports a theory and another part that believes it supports something totally different. So because they cannot come to an agreement, what I do is I will actually tell you both of them, and I will let it for yourself to actually choose the one that you like the most and more interesting. Yeah. So there is a group of historians that says that these symbols here are actually Masonic. They are put here by the Freemasons. That's the reason behind it. And some of the reasons that they use to justify their theory and to support it is, first of all, the type of symbols that are used, because usually there are some prevalent. What have you seen the most? There are two that are very common: flowers and cross. Cross is also, but there is another one together with the flower. There is a very common one. Another wind rose also. Stars. Maybe also depends on where you came. There are a lot of stars. The two most common ones are flowers and stars. And so what they say is that, okay, so they are nature-based elements, which is common to be used in Masonic symbol. There will be trees, water, sun, something like that. Also, the street that was chosen by them to put the symbols, because it said that the best place to hide something is at plain sight, where everyone can see it, but no one needs it. And here we are talking about the shopping street, where people are looking at the shop. No one here looks at the floor, besides you that are coming with me. But all the rest of the people, no one will actually look at the floor like they pass here. And also, where is that bench over there? It's actually a door to a building 160 years old, that for many years was believed to be the gathering point for the Masonic meeting. So what they say is that the symbols are here to somehow guide the people, so that they know that they are approaching the place where the meetings take place. So this is one thing. Then there is another side of historians that don't support it and don't agree with it, and they say that actually the symbols are here because of the workers, because of the people that actually put here the stones one by one. So what they say is that because this is always the same, yeah, it's a pattern, yeah? So just repeat over and over and over and over again, it's always the same thing. They were using these parts because they are slightly wider than the rest to leave personal signatures of their job. To leave also some message and to be able to express their creativity, including leaving political messages. Like the first one that I showed. For you to understand, during the period when these streets were built, which was during the 20s, 30s, yeah, so now 100 years ago, Portugal was under a dictatorship, a right-side dictatorship, by Salazar. So what the workers' theory supporter says that the first symbol that I showed you is in fact the communist symbol that was put there by one of the workers against the dictatorship and somehow demanding rights for the workers. Then the Masonic supporters will tell you that that symbol that I showed you is actually not the communist symbol. And why? Because in the symbol over there, the sickle is drawn in this way, yeah? When you look at it, not by perspective, but from yours. It's like that. Which means it's pointing to the right side. And in the communist symbol, the sickle has to be pointing to the left. Should be the other way around. Then, these worker supporters will tell you, well, they were workers. They knew there was a sickle and a hammer, they were under pressure, under a dictatorship, they were not really thinking if it was right or to the left or something like that. So, as I told you, these are the two theories that explain the symbols here. There is still this discussion going on, and it's really a big discussion. Even some years ago in the national TV, there was a documentary just about this street with the people from both sides, with a lot of books showing that their theory was the correct one. So it's a documentary, it's like half an hour just talking about this street, yeah, with people from one side and the other, and the debates between them. So still this discussion is going on. So as I told you, I just leave it to you individually to choose the one that you like the most, and the one that you keep as an explanation if someone asks you about these symbols. Yeah? So, looks like rain is coming and going, but it's being super hot. It's already quite blue again in that side. We still have 2 stops to go, but before we go to them, there's the last thing I want to tell you in this. So I know that for all of you at some point of your trip, you will be bored. Well, this is also part of all this. There is a time that you are bored, you don't know what to do. And usually, when this time comes, the first thought that comes to your mind will be, I really wish that Carlos has given me a challenge.
No, it's from the street.
Something to do during this time that I don't know. So because of that, because I know that this will come to your minds, I will leave you the challenge. Yeah? So I can tell you that in all this street, yes, from where we started until the end, that is, we are almost in the end of it, there are around 450 of these parts, yeah? More or less 450, but in only one there is a number. There is only one that has a number. The number is the number 36, is written in this direction, like that, 3, 6. You just leave it the challenge to find it. As simple as that. It's very common that when you do find it, you have this eureka moment of, now I understand why. Yes, this is common to help when you do find it. Yeah? But, yeah, so I just leave you the challenge. Okay, very good. So we'll continue by here. We are going to the left, yeah, in the small street. Let's go.
Travissa do Mozilla. Allora. Sorry.
This is very close and very easy. And then you see something big. Big pipe to make coffee. Then you get the sculpture, then you go to place. You can also get culture, like one of the heroes, it's only in this shop here. Yeah, so we can try to come to this traditional community.
Alberta. Good.
Você marcou parceiro? Marca parceiro. Mainly because of the building over there. Careful there. I advise you don't stay under the trees because pigeons really like when people are under the tree. This specific tree, although it only happened 3 times in 5 years of truth, only 3 people got it. If you want to be the fourth. But yeah, they really like that sport. Especially when we are under. So yeah, so this building over here, which in the past, when it was originally built, this was during the 16th century, very, very end of 16th century. And originally it was a college, the Jesuits college. And after the earthquake, when Marquês de Pombal was in charge, he didn't really want religious orders, such as the Jesuits, to actually have colleges, in this kind of place. So he didn't allow them to continue here, so the building actually got abandoned for a long period. It was only used for more or less 3 years during the time which Napoleon troops came here to Faro. This was the place that they used as the place for the troops to be. So the place where they would have their weapons and they would sleep, and like the headquarters, let's say, like the hub where they were. Then, when the troops left, the building got abandoned again until the middle of the 19th century. So Actually, the story behind the building, or the last story behind the building, starts in the very beginning of the 19th century, in 1805. During this period, there was a man living in Italy called Lazzaro Doglioni. Lazzaro Doglioni was a doctor back in Venice, where he used to live, and he was also a sailor. Yeah, this is something that he really enjoyed. And one day he decided to make a boat trip all the way from Venice until Ireland. Yeah, so he would go all the Mediterranean and then up the Atlantic Ocean until Ireland. And everything was going good until he arrived very close to Tavira, which is a city that lies around 30 kilometers from where we are, to the east. He had a problem there with his boat. The boat actually sank. He managed to be saved with the help of some of the locals. Then he was brought to Faro, because here we used to have a Venetian consulate during that period. And also here he could access better health care, because the city was bigger and more prepared. So he stayed here recovering, also trying to figure out how he would go back to Italy, because he didn't have a boat anymore to go back. And during this period, he actually started meeting the locals. He started enjoying the people, the food, the climate here. So at some point, actually decided to don't go back and just stay living in Faro. One of the reasons, maybe even the main reason that why he decided to stay here, is because at some point he fell in love. He fell in love with a girl here from Faro. And who was this girl? Sorry, I was distracted because I just saw a car going on the wrong street. You cannot enter in that street. It's like going on the opposite side, so I was distracted with it, and I was hoping that no one comes from the other side and crashes. So, who was this girl? This girl was the daughter of actually the most successful businessman that we had here in Faro in that time. Also, she falls in love with Doglioni, so it's a reciprocal love story. Yeah? So they try to get married, both of them. And it was very difficult to convince the parents of the girl for this wedding to take place, but eventually they managed. And they got married. Turned out to be actually a good decision for the family, because Doglioni was actually a very smart man and things were going good. But there was one thing that Doglioni was missing: culture. Because Doglioni came from Venice, from a place where a cultural movement was already taking place. And he arrived to Faro, which in that time was a very, very tiny town, where most of the people were actually elite, right? So most of the people could not read, could not write, and culture definitely was not part of the priority. So what he decided to do, he decided that he will be the one bringing culture, not only for himself, but for the population in general. So what he did, he bought this building that was abandoned. He was living in this street. He was living in a very big building that is on that side. When we cross the street, we'll be able to see it. It's a big white and yellow building, still nowadays called Palace Doglioni. So he was living there. So he bought the building that was right on the top of the street where he lived. And inside he built a theater. A theater that still until today is exactly the same as when he built it. It was inaugurated as a theater back in 1845. And I will show you how it looks inside, because it's very different the inside from the outside. So this is how it looks inside. I know that outside is falling apart a bit, but inside is still as the original one. Yeah. The inspiration that he had on his mind, of course, in a way smaller scale, Scala Theatre of Milan. Yeah, this is what he knew. Yeah? This was his reality. So of course this one is way smaller. This one can fit around 250 people, more or less. Yeah, it's really, really tiny, very cozy. And what is also important about this place over here is not only the architectonical part or the beauty that it might have, but actually the meaning that he wanted this place to have for the people. So starting by the name. The name of it is Letters. Theater Letters. It says there on the right part, yeah, right and white, and also is the name now of the street. It gives name also to the street. And what is Letters? Letters is actually coming from the Greek mythology. And today we have someone from Greece, so we will explain this part.
Idea.
Actually, when you read it in Greek, you don't read letters, you read it lithi. It's a river.
It
It's
is.
one of the rivers of the underworld in the Greek mythology, usually said to be the river of forgetfulness. So it's a river that has this property that if you enter in the waters, you erase your memories, the things that. So basically, you just erase your conscience and your memory. And this metaphorically is what W1 wants. Here would be the reality. Yeah? So this is the real world. Usually in that time, a hard-working world, mainly the people that were living here, they were either farmers or fishermen. And when you would cross the doors there, you would enter a mythological world where you could forget about what is outside. A place where you would go to just entertain yourself and, well, spend a good time. And at the same time, actually also learning something, because he really believed that through culture, he could actually teach people and people could get more educated through culture. So that's also the reason why I decided to put, there is a sentence on the top of the theater, when we cross, see it better. It says Monet oblectando. It's not Monet, the French painter, it's Monet oblectando. Translate, it's Latin. Translating it literally to English, it means instruct, playing. So to give instructions or to teach by a playful way, yeah? So not as a regular way of learning, but by arts, by comedy, drama, by music, by dances, by concerts, by everything like that. So that's why still for us here in Faro, this theater is quite special and we have an emotional connection. So we have another theater here, which is bigger, it's more comfortable, has a better acoustic, better lighting, all these kind of things. But when we come to see something here and when we go to the other theater, the feeling is a little bit different. Also, if you are interested in, because this is considered an historical theater, if some of you are interested in historical theaters, there is a website, it's called European Route of Historical Theaters, where you can actually go and you can see in every country in Europe which are the ones considered to be historical theaters in every country. In Portugal, there are only 4. And one of them is this one. And so we only have one here, one in Évora, one in Lisbon, and one in Braga. And that's all that is historical, so like old theaters and usually quite with this kind of shape. Okay, very good. So we go to our last stop. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. With cool.
Wow, wow.
And why is this church important? So the name of this church is Faro, historic significance. And, this, well, for many people, it's like the second church here in Faro, yeah, after the cathedral. And actually, it's a church that was built very few years before the earthquake, just 20 years more or less. So because of that, it was, and because it's also more far from the sea than the cathedral, it didn't get so destroyed as the other places. And also because it was built in a different time, it was built during a time when there was also a very big Baroque influence. So because of that, the church is totally different from this one. Is very goldish inside, yeah? So it's full of golden leaf, yeah, totally different from the other. But actually, the main reason why a lot of people come to visit this church is it's not because of the church itself, but because of a small chapel that is on the back of the church, called the Bones Chapel. And called like that because, in fact, it's done by human bones. Yeah, so this is how the wall and all the ceiling is done. This is one of the walls, but all the walls and all the ceiling are like this. So, yeah, everything. Actually, around 700 of them. So this is one of the walls, but all the walls, all the ceilings.
I read it was 5,000, I don't know, something like that.
No, 700. It's not that big. 5,000 is probably in Evro. In Evro, there is the biggest bone church of the country. There, it's around those numbers. This one is smaller. Yeah.
Where did they get the bones?
Why and from who? Yeah. So these bones are from different people. So the first ones are from monks that were actually living here. Then at some point, there was a disease here in Faro that killed a lot of people, and we didn't have space in the cemetery to bury them. So what happened in that is that they took the bones out of the graves and they brought them here so that they could put the other people in the graves. And then at some point, this place was famous, and people that were donating money to the church would actually want to be inside. So then the last ones that came here, they actually wanted to be here. Yeah? So they were giving money in order to have this right when they would be done. The reason behind why to build this kind of churches, they don't exist only here in Portugal. Here we have 7 in all the country, but you have them in many countries in Europe. Yeah, in Austria there is 1, in Poland there are 2, in Italy there are 4, in Czech Republic almost 20, in Spain there is 1. So there are in many, in Valladolid. Yeah? Spain is
Who's the
Valladolid.
first? Who's the first?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I have no clue who was the first to do it. But in all of them, usually the idea was one. That was to remind people that death is part of the human condition. So the time for us to do something with our lives is while we are alive. And also the other idea was here, you don't understand, like, although there are different people from different social classes in that time, here inside the church, they didn't put them in some hierarchical way. They are just randomly put. In order to also to people to think that, okay, in the end, we are just a skull and bones, and there you cannot see any difference between the people that were rich or poor or some other different characteristics that people might have. I will also stop now because actually they are almost closing, and for some of you, I don't know, for the ones that want to go inside, because they will close now at 1, that is so sharp. But when you enter, it's okay, then you can stay longer, and then they will open again only on Monday.
Okay.
So I will still be here for a few minutes giving some tips or something. Maybe if you go and you come back, I'm still here. But officially, we are ending the tour because some of you, I know that you want to go and visit it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
For coming with me. As I told you, I will still be here for some minutes. So maybe some of you, when you come